That's all I got.
Right.
I'm Brett.
I'm Miranda.
Just like last week.
Just like last week.
And here we are again. This week, you can't see it, but Fluff is joining us. She's on our desktop.
Yes.
But she is laying low right now. I think she's camera shy. So, yes. Anyway, hello. Thanks for joining us. We are here broadcasting in beautiful Keene, Texas. Not actually beautiful. It's pretty overcast and cold today.
Well, it's beautiful to some people.
No, Aspen likes it. Aspen's pointing at my throat. What's wrong with my throat? What about? It's not about you. Everything's not about you.
Mic? No,
It's nothing.
Okay.
Aspen's being distracting. But so yeah, here we are. It's kind of a dreary. I can't really say fall day. We don't really get fall here in Texas. It doesn't seem like.
There's some yellow leaves out there, though.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. Not like you folks up in New England get, where it's pretty and fall colors and like Kathy out in North Carolina. I bet you get. Well, I don't know when peak week. It's probably already gone. Peak week in North Carolina is when all the leaves are like in their most colorful. I think that's already passed though. But it's pretty beautiful out there during fall. I don't think we've had. Maryland was the last fall I think we really had.
Yeah, they're really pretty. I mean, I certainly raked up plenty of leaves in our yard, but it wasn't like a super pretty fall.
Nope. It's, and then Nebraska just, corn does not make for a good fall color changing, I don't think. But anyway, so yeah, today we're talking about some stuff, and I'm going to let Miranda do all that. Ladies and gentlemen, Miranda.
Okay, well, I don't know, this last week, I guess, Brett and I were talking about what we're going to talk about next time we're going to teach Sabbath school. And Brett said, well, why don't you start off Sabbath school by asking, who was your best friend in high school, and what crazy things did you do together? And I thought, I don't know. I guess if I had to answer that question, what would I say? What would you say?
I didn't do crazy things in high school. I was very calm. I was a very good student. And yet, unlike what you're about to hear, things I didn't know about my wife, who I assumed was the sweet, kind, quiet bookworm girl who helped others obey the rules, little did I know, she was on the cutting edge of rebellion, and she may as well have been in the movie Grease.
Okay, well, I ought to make him tell whatever stories he has to tell, but notice he's not telling them.
They match nothing next to your exploits.
Ah, right. Well, anyways, okay, so I had to think about it for a bit, but my best friend's name was Marcy, and so we both went to Laurelwood Academy, which was a boarding academy, but we were both village students. And of course,
Village students are always the worst.
Well, generally, I hate to say it, but they are, or were, yeah.
Car thief. Please continue.
So that means like every 6 weeks or so when there was home leave, they wouldn't have academy church. We would have to, if we wanted to go to church, we would go to the village church.
They didn't have church at the academy?
No, not on home leaves.
Really?
No. Well, I mean, because all the students went home. I saw the village students, and they could go to the village church.
That's interesting. I went to Pisgah. That was a boarding school, but, the Pisgah church operated whether we were there or not.
Right, the Pisgah church did, but this, at Laurelwood, in the school chapel, every week they had their own services.
Really?
Yeah.
How big was your school?
I don't remember. 300-something students, maybe? Well, I don't know.
I don't know anything about you. I always thought she went to this little, 75 student homeschool private.
Way more than 75 students.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if there was 300.
Who are you?
There was a lot. There was a lot of students. Enough that they had their own church service for the kids. Yeah.
Did you have like spiky hair and everything? Was that you? Did you have the spikes coming out your...
No, I've always had hair like this.
Oh my gosh.
So anyways, Now Brett's entirely thrown me off of my...
You think you're off? The things I'm learning about my wife.
Right. So anyways, so like I said, for Home Week, all the students would go home, and then the rest of us would, if we wanted to, would go to the village church. No, my sister would actually sleep in on those weekends and take it easy, but I enjoyed going to church, so I would get up and go to the village church. Well...
That was a cover. I enjoy going to church. So I can steal cars.
It wasn't stealing a car. So, this was back before texts. And of course, we had a phone. I don't know why she didn't call me. Maybe she didn't want her parents over here. Or maybe she didn't hear about it till the morning. She didn't think about it till morning. I don't know. But anyways, when I got to church, she's like, hey, I have an idea. Let's take my parents' car. Let's go to the next town. And let's eat some breakfast. And then we'll come back. And I was like, well, okay. So off we went, and it was all great until we got back. Then, when we went to park, of course, the parking space that we had vacated had been taken up by someone who had arrived late to church.
Didn't think this through, did you?
No.
Didn't put a whole lot of thought into this plan, did you?
No,
She probably wanted to sit in the car and just skip church, and Miranda was over here. No, let's go to the next town over.
No.
We'll get some eggs and smokes and hang out.
So, then we, I think we went someplace like Village Inn, have pancakes or something like that.
Don't make this try to sound wholesome. There's nothing wholesome here. You stole a car. You went joyriding to the next town over.
We could hardly steal a car. She had her keys, her very own set of keys to her parents' car. Okay. So, anyways, there we were. And now, fortunately, just 2 parking spaces down was an empty space. So went ahead and pulled in there and hoped that her parents wouldn't notice a difference, right? Well, as everybody's leaving the church, I exited separately from her family, of course. And so Marcy told me about it later. So as they were getting closer to their car, her dad says, wait, that's not where I parked. And her mom says, oh, now, honey, of course that's where you parked. That's right, exactly where you parked. And of course, and Marcy jumped right in and said, yeah, of course, Dad, that's where you parked, remember? And he's like, oh, okay, sure. I guess I just don't remember that. I thought I parked up here a little closer. So.
Stealing, lying.
I didn't steal
not
anything.
Honoring my father and mother.
So, I like to make analogies to stories. I was surprised I hadn't made an analogy to this one.
Because you didn't want the world to know what your real underlying bubbling character of evil.
Bubbling, I don't have a bubbly character. We all know this. The whole world knows this. I'm on the
I didn't know this. Oh my gosh, what am I going to tell my mom?
So I got to thinking about this story, and I wondered, what spiritual analogy I could apply to it. So basically, it's easy to believe a lie, right? When it is just 2 parking spots down from the truth. And it's also easy to believe a lie that's convenient to believe. Like it was convenient for Marcy's dad to believe the lie as a truth.
And a lot of lies like that. It's like, the best lies that, you've probably heard the best lies that Satan tells are 90% truth, right? And just 10% lie. And then, if that, yeah. But also, a lot of times it's offered to us as things we want to believe anyway, so it doesn't take much to convince us, because you're like, well, we want to believe it is true. Look, it's mostly true, and yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell just a couple stories to start out with. This one's a little bit shorter.
By the way, that's how we lie to ourselves, too. You get, most of it right, and it's something we want to have, want to do, want to believe, want to, and it's easy to fool ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we lived in Alaska for a while, I drove a 2-wheel drive van. And
2-wheel drive?
Yeah. Rear-wheel drive.
Oh, rear wheel. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Because obviously there's front wheel and rear wheel, but...
Yeah, so this is old. Rear wheel was old. Isn't it?
Are you insinuating something?
She stole a bad rear wheel car this time.
No. It was my personal car, okay? So... Now, I can parallel park with some skill.
Actually, yeah, she is really good at that.
Okay. what I don't like to talk about, and I rarely tell this story because of that, is that backing up downhill on ice is not a skill of mine. Though I saw it being done with true skill, and I'm like, wow, how do these people do that? And because a friend of mine actually lived in a place on a hill, and all these houses or places were just all lined up, right? And how they made it up and down that hill of solid ice all the time, I have no idea.
What were you driving?
Oh, it's just a little car, a little mini station wagon.
Oh, it wasn't the RAV? I was gonna say the RAV.
Oh
would have
no,
done well.
the Rav would do anything I wanted.
I was gonna
wanted it
say,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a station. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that, and I drove a couple different cars, like a Ford Tempo for a while, and just
Okay.
cars. So, or a van. So I tried more than once, out of necessity, to back up downhill on ice, and every time I would freak out basically and hit the brakes. Now,
Why would you do that?
Well, because I would just go, no!
That's the worst thing you could do.
Yes, yes. So you hit the brakes and automatically you're going to slide off the road into the snowdrift. And once you're there, you're just that, hopefully somebody was going to come on by and push you out, right? So fortunately, that's generally what happened. Or once I was backing up down this really long, narrow hill, and so I hit the brakes, and once you know, like the car just stopped right before, like it just slid off and stopped right before this tree stump. I couldn't back up, and I couldn't go forwards. So, yeah.
How many times did this happen? Didn't you learn after the first time not to brake going downhill on ice?
No, I knew I wasn't supposed to, but that's not the point. Oh. At the moment, I was like, ah, and I hit the brakes.
And you panicked at the brakes.
Yes. So, anyways, at the moment, hitting the brakes in that little tiny moment seemed like a good idea, and so I would do it, and it wasn't a good idea, obviously.
That is human nature, though. Think about all the things in life we do that we've done it before and we know it doesn't work, but in the moment we do it again, even though we know, and we still do it again. I have this this game I play with the students called the Game with No Rules, and it's one of the, usually like when in high school I would set it up, and it looks like baseball. I put out 3 bases and little pitchers mound, and I just break them into 2 teams. And I don't tell them we're playing baseball. I just put it out and it's like, all right, ready and play. And immediately they start trying to play baseball, but the rules are different, and I don't tell them the rules. They're supposed to have to figure it out while they play, and without fail, they will go for 45 minutes or more trying the same things over and over again, even though they don't work. And they kind of understand they can't get out of that box of, all right, this is not how you make a strike or get an out or get a run. Let's try something else. They won't try something else. They'll stay in that pattern, even though it doesn't work. It's just like human nature.
Yeah. So that's basically, sometimes we get in situations that we get anxious about, and we hit the brakes and slide into the snowbank, which is what they did. They just kept sliding into the snowbank, sliding over and over.
Yeah.
And yet they still kept hitting the brakes.
And they would get frustrated. Yeah. They're just adding frustration onto frustration. Like, you get anxious and you get more anxious, yeah.
Yeah. So in life, as Christians, we're to walk by faith, right? And yet, sometimes like we can't see we're walking by faith. We know the promise, and yet it's like, oh no, and we hit the brakes, and because we can't see where we're going, walking by faith, and so. Abraham, for example, is known as a man of great faith, right? And yet he too was held prisoner by various lies. He believed he needed to lie about Sarah being his wife, right? Actually, he did that twice. And basically, he just told a half-truth. Well, she's my sister, which was true. But anyways, and also in that situation, it turns out he figures out God didn't need his help. Because we don't know exactly what would have happened if he wouldn't have lied about it. But eventually, the king who wanted Sarah as his wife and had already taken her to live in his palace, he figures out that, wait a second, these guys are married after all. And he lied to me, and God is bringing down like these punishments basically on him and his people. And
Miranda has once again assumed everyone knows the story she's talking about.
well, this is why I'm telling this story.
So, so Abraham and Sarah Egypt was one, right?
Yeah, they were in Egypt.
They were in Egypt, and
Well, they weren't in Egypt. They went to Egypt because their land had famine.
And so, the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, thought Sarah was pleasant to look at and wanted her for one of his wives. And when confronted, Abraham was nervous that, because in those days there wasn't really the whole concept of dating. You just killed all the other suitors and you took the woman for yourself. And that's what Abraham was afraid of, that the Pharaoh would kill him and take Sarah. So he lied and said, this is my sister. And, it was a half-truth because they were related. Because back in the Bible, sometimes that happened. And anyway, so, once, he took Sarah to the palace and, plagues rained down on Egypt. Why, Anubis, why? Plagues, plagues. And that was, not good for Egypt. And so, then Pharaoh comes back and says, what's going on? It's really my wife. Like, why didn't you tell me, you moron? And, gave Sarah back to Abraham.
Yeah, but he didn't, well, it was one of those things where technically he could have just gotten rid of Abraham, but he kind of was clearly in fear of Abraham's God.
Yes.
And so not only did he just go ahead and give Sarah back, but he gave him other stuff, like more cattle and riches, wealth of some sort. Like, all right, go on your way and take all this extra stuff with you, and may your God bless you and all this kind of stuff.
Not that it was justification for what Abraham did, but it's one of those situations where God used a mistake, and Abraham came out, blessed anyway.
Right. Abraham could see how he had messed up and the whole faith thing, and yet God showed up there being so faithful to him anyways.
Yeah. Which makes one wonder, why did he do it again?
You do kind of have to wonder, but once again, it gets a little icy.
You're sliding down that hill.
Just brakes. Yes, and off into the snowbank.
Yeah. So we're not alone. Abraham did the same thing.
Yeah. And of course, then he also believes the lie that God needs his help to give him the promised son. So he lives out that lie and believes it, and it makes him quite happy for about 15 years, right?
Yes, they had Ishmael. If you didn't know that, because a lot of times we pass over and it's like, and there was Ishmael, and then Isaac was born, but it wasn't like just a couple of years later. It was like he was a teenager. So they went 15 years believing and raising, and everybody believing Ishmael was the chosen one.
Was the promised son, yes. And, God comes along with the truth and bursts that little bubble and lets Abraham know that God did not need his help to give him the promised son.
Because it was God's timing, not Abraham and Sarah's timing.
But Ishmael looked like the promised son, and it was so easy to believe that he was a promised son, even though he wasn't in the right parking place.
Yep, he was close.
Right, he was close. He was 2 spots down, but he was not in that parking space.
And again, a lie you want to believe.
Yes, definitely wanted to believe that. But when we have accepted the lie and are living it out, it is usually inconvenient to take a closer look at the truth, and so we don't. And oftentimes, in order to avoid anxiety, we live out anxiety.
The old Chinese proverb, I think it's Chinese, we often find ourselves confronting the fate on the path we use to avoid it, or something like that. But so many times the anxiety or whatever we try to avoid, we end up creating more anxiety and problems. Like with lying, they say, you tell one lie, now you tell 3 lies to cover the one lie, and, you just create more, but we do that to avoid pain or to avoid being wrong, confronted with the truth. Sometimes we try to do everything to avoid it, and in all that avoidance, we just tend to make things worse, like when we don't allow ourselves to see the truth or be confronted with the truth. It's like in recovery, when we say, you go everywhere else but the truth. You take every other path but the truth, and you blame life for your problems and other people for your problems and your job for your problems and your spouse for your problems, and you're just mounting and mounting and mounting, and all that pain and stuff inside just gets worse and worse and worse. And you really go through way more pain than the pain of and the freedom of actually going
yes,
to the truth.
It's true. So basically, Abraham lived out a lie because of anxiety and worry. And about what might happen if he told the truth. He might die, or he might never have the promised son. So he forgets entirely the promise God had made to him. He said, of course, God told him, he takes him outside and he says, I will make you a great nation. And your descendants are going to be more than the stars in the sky and the sands on the sea. So God's promises are true, right? But that's generally a lot of times when we look back in retrospect, right? So they may not always look like we thought they would. I'm sure Abraham never imagined that his wife would have the promised son when she was 90 and he was like 100. It just in all his wildest imagination, God carrying out his promise would not have looked like that. He thought God clearly would carry out his promise within the confines of what clearly man could do for himself.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, still for us today, a lot of times, we know what God's promise is, or we know what God's word says, or we know, we think we know what it's supposed to look like. God working his will in my life. And, like Abraham, we expect it to come in ways that, make sense to us. And, a lot of times it doesn't. It looks completely different than what, think how many things in the Bible look completely different to, than what the people thought it should be, like Abraham.
Abraham and Joseph.
The disciples with Jesus, they thought he was this kind of savior, but he wasn't. I mean, all kinds of times in the Bible it shows you, like, what you usually think is not really what God has in mind. It's, actually even better than what you're thinking.
Well, even Joseph's brothers, for example, what they thought should be truth wasn't either.
Yeah, and all the things people went through to get to that place.
Yeah. So basically, what kind of faith-building experiences led up to that one last story that put Abraham into the number one spot as a man of great faith? So basically, it was experiences where he didn't use his faith.
Yeah.
But God still was faithful to him. And I'm sure that not only us, but you have had experiences like that as well.
Yeah, I think about like Abraham, since we're talking about him, but think of all the failures that and shortcomings he went. And that was part of his journey. He was still the father of many nations. God still worked his will through him and in him and still gave him the promise he gave him. And yet there were so many failures along the way. And it wasn't just Abraham. The whole children of Israel, their whole story, same thing. And other men, same thing. Peter, the disciples, so many failures, and yet, he was one of the great apostles. And Paul, I mean, they all had this whole series of failures, but that was part of their journey. And God didn't, say, well, you're a mess, I'm not using you. I mean, he stayed, true to his word through all these people. So your failures are not fatal. They're part of the journey.
Right. Then God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son to him. And notice, he didn't tell him to sacrifice Ishmael.
Right.
He didn't. That wasn't part of any equation for God's plan. This time, Abraham decided to not believe a lie that in the moment looked like the truth, and it seemed like the best way to handle the situation, because it would have made sense to just go, no, because if I kill my son, the promised son, then how is it that God's going to keep his promises to me, right? So this time, he was just going to do what God told him to do, even though God hadn't told him what would happen after he did it. So as he stood there ready to sacrifice his son, he learned that there is no darkness in the valley of the shadow of death, because God brings the light of his truth with him. Every time that God asks us to give up something that we don't want to give up, that's the valley of shadow of self, of the death to self. And, if we just go ahead and do that, wow, God shines his truth into that. And we arrive in such a new place of new depth in relationship with God that it's amazingly different.
God asked me to give up cake and ice cream. What do I get? Where's my light? What do I get in place of that? That's what I want to know.
Maybe you need to explore the truth of that.
I get to live. That's why.
Yes. No.
But isn't it interesting, like in that thing, that there was no way out of that? Abraham couldn't see any way out. He didn't know what was going to happen, and yet he walked by faith anyway. He's like, God asked me to do this. I don't know what he's going to do, but he's going to do something, because he promised the child. He promised me Isaac. Here is Isaac. So whatever he's got planned, he can do it. I'm just going to do what he tells me to do.
Yeah. So picture Abraham there in the valley of the shadow of death to self, but at the same time on the mountaintop of living for God. Mm-hmm. And Abraham hears the voice of God. Don't do it. Look, here I provided the ram as a sacrifice. And now that in itself is a living example of God's promise to his people, God's gift of truth to be sent to them in the future. So Abraham must have felt like the disciples in the storm and the boat was just about to sink. But what he didn't yet realize is what Jesus was not only in the boat, but Jesus was the boat, carrying him across to the place he had said that they were going. So God's words are powerful. When we live them out, they are truth. They are light, pointing to the one with the power to make it happen. God's words put to death any belief that we can do it for ourselves.
I think you should say that again.
God's words put to death any belief that we can do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And they show us that God provides. God does all for us, while we did nothing but live out our love for him, which was a gift to him, gift from him to us to start out with.
I think you should say that again too.
Okay, so God does all for us, while we did nothing but live out our love for him, which was a gift from him to us to start out with.
There you go. So yeah, I like this because it was, some things that were in here that we were talking about that I think is meaningful to us is we all do that panicky thing when we start sliding on ice downhill, and we do things we know are wrong or don't work, and we do them anyway, and that's human nature. We tend to fall back on things that we're comfortable with or are familiar with, even if they're bad for us or don't work. And so did Abraham. And like our failures are not fatal like for him, and God can work even through our failures. He's more interested in our reaction to those things than our action in the moment, because Abraham was being brought to a point where he was able to go back and in that moment on the mountain go, all these times where I thought I knew better didn't work out really well. So even though I can't see the future, I'm going to do what I know God's telling me to do. And I mean, that's something you grow into, and sometimes you do it, and sometimes you even fail at that. But again, it's a point where God is bringing us to, and then kind of in the end, you look at it and you think, I'm growing, I'm learning, and when you get old enough, you start to look back and you think, I really didn't do any of this at all. That everything I've really attained or achieved or learned or grown to was only because God gave me the opportunity, the experience, and the strength, and the love, and the patience, and whatever. It all came from him anyway, which brings you even more to a place of, I just need to let go and, let God guide and direct me, and, do my best to live a relationship of love with him.
That's right. Very good. Summing it up.
Yes. To sum up. So, yeah. All right. Well, anything else?
No, that's it for today.
That's it for today. So, thanks for joining us. Again, I'm Brett.
I'm Miranda, and there's Aspen.
Like, just, wow. That sounded so canned. We were just, I don't know. Aspen is looking at me like, what are you talking about? So, hope you had a great Sabbath day and
we
have a
did.
great week. Yeah, it's kind of fun. We were going to go somewhere today and we didn't.
But we didn't.
I blame Aspen. She never wants to go and do anything.
It's not true. She wanted to go to an aquarium. And that sounded like a very nice idea until we figured out it would cost us $90 just to get through the doors for all the three of us. And we decided that was not the best idea.
No. So if you know of any inexpensive things to do in and around Keene or the Dallas metropolitan area, let us know. Because I think we've just about exhausted everything there is to do.
We just about have.
Anyway, so thanks for joining us. We'll